a different episode. First of all, Donte's wife is bringing a new person into the world as we speak, so it is just me today. But I have a very special guest named Sioux Bean. So Sioux Bean, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your work, and by the way, audience, since my brain is apparently scrambled right now, the reason we're doing this interview is to continue our IMCECA preparatory interview series. IMCECA's in a couple weeks, which is absolutely insane. So so we wanted to bring in Sioux Bean to kind of talk about his work and talk about the studio that he opened up last year. Was that 2020? I guess 2020 was 2 years ago now.
Yeah, but 2021, but like within a few months. I think we're about on month 6 or 7 now for sure, but it's been good. But yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your work, kind of how you got into clay and what themes you explore through your work.
Yeah, well, man, it's been a journey, like, for sure. I got into clay at a really young age. I was pretty lucky. I found it at age 14.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I grown up in Reno, Nevada, and we had a pretty cool vocational program that was like behind our high school, and it had a metal shop, a wood shop, an auto shop, and they had a dope ass ceramics program that was in there too.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. And so it was just kind of like an Art 1 class. They give you like a bunch of different stuff. And I had definitely always been interested in the arts. I grew up in an artistic family. My mom went to FITM, Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandise. Yeah. So there was always like that thing. She was a hairdresser in the 80s, so she gave me license to be weird, like, for sure. And like I said, the family was always into stuff. Was dancing, music. I have a pretty musical family. I did not inherit like that side of the things, which is fine. It's all good. But yeah, so it was all in there. And then I had an Art 1 class, but I was always like really bad at drawing, and so I didn't I feel like I had. In areas that I grew up, or even when we're young and we're like inexperienced with things, we have ideas of what we think art is, and it's usually on the second dimension.
Yes, yeah. One of the last folks that we interviewed, we literally had that same discussion that it's like, oh yeah, you don't think you're an artist if you can't like draw, but it's like you don't realize as a young person that there's like all these other media out there.
Exactly. So clay was actually one of the great things, and I still really do like find that that's one of its most powerful things, but had shown me a different avenue, and then has just sort of from that age of 14 I was able to make things in the third dimension. So I was a classically trained sculptor, and that's what I happen to be like really good at, and specifically or was naturally good at, might I say. Not really good at, my bad.
I mean, it can be both.
I mean, yeah.
you can pump yourself up. It's good. You can pump yourself up.
That's what I happen to just be naturally good at. That I found that the images in my head could be made with my hands for the most part of what I was going for, as opposed to the drawings that were quite abstract at the time. For sure. So,
I feel you on that.
I just ran with that, and then ever since then, I got really lucky to have people that were like around me and be close to facilities like that in the high school, and I was able to gain a really big knowledge in all kinds of different mediums, but like still focused on clay. And when it came up through the years, like I said, I was doing sculpture, and even then you have these ideas of what you think art is, and so you get onto this next part of things, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna make like figurative sculptures, I'm gonna do all this kind of stuff because this is what like I view as fine arts, it's the Michelangelo or the Donatello, it's these like types of sculptures and these types of things. And so, you gear your work towards that way. And I don't know, I think at one point as I was moving up through the ranks and building more knowledge, 19, 20, 21, still doing junior college classes, I always had a practice. So no matter what, I was always taking one semester of course wherever I could, or trying to do something. I worked at a paint your own pottery shop. Yeah, it was super dope. It was like, I feel like there's a lot of people who have this similar journey too, as like ceramic artists. They found it young, and they start dipping their toes in everything that they can kind of see what's up. I worked for an apprentice potter. I was an apprentice for like a studio potter for a minute, and he paid me in piecework, and so I didn't get good, but I was like able to figure out like a lot of the stuff. In a basis. But
was this when you were still in high school? Was this like kind of moving like on into college?
This was like when I was like 17. So yeah, I moved out of my house when I was pretty young, when I was like 16.
Okay, wow.
So my last like senior year of high school, I was living on my own, and I was doing things, various jobs that I could.
Good for you.
Yeah, it was chill. Worked as a cook, and so I was like I worked at a pizza place, like kind of classic, across the street from my high school. It was very quaint for sure. And that I had always had a love for food as well, and so there was a whole juggling of that kind of thing through my whole life. As I went up, I would come up the ranks and learn things in the food industry, because that's what was financially supporting any other things that I wanted to do, rent, as well as a studio or a semester's pay. For clay. And as you know, once you fall in love with clay, like you're not really rationalizing things you spend like on stuff anymore. You're just like, I need to feed this. I need to feed this.
Yeah, whatever it takes to like make this happen.
Clay? Oh, I'll definitely take that.
Yeah.
100%.
Oh my gosh.
So you're just that's what kept me through, and so I was really lucky, and I think it sucks. Hindsight is always 20/20, right? And when you look back, I got to have a lot of cool experiences coming up through the ranks and building my career as a food industry person, and bartending and cooking and serving, and from really low level fry cook and pizza cook in Reno, and then like coming to Sacramento and being able to learn about farms and farm to fork, and like I was with a very pivotal group of restaurant industry people that moved to San Francisco and the Napa mid 2000s, and we all got trained by these celebrity chefs and worked in Michelin restaurants.
Oh my god, how cool.
It was crazy. Like for the last almost coupling the same amount of time, I think about 17, 19 years, I was in the food industry. Wow, yeah. I been doing clay for about 22, 23 years. And so, they were always right neck and neck with each other. But yeah, I got to move up and do some really cool food industry stuff. And so it was a career for me. And then at the same time, doing the paint your own pottery shop, working for a studio apprentice, bouncing around from being like a studio tech to junior college. And then I came to Sacramento. I worked at a place called Panama Pottery.
Oh yeah.
And
I think that may have been where we met for the first time. I think because I was there 2009, I think, or 2008. When were you there?
I was there. Let's see. I moved to Sac in 04, 05, and then I got a job there pretty quickly. So it was probably around the same time, 07. Okay. And I was there for a few years. Most definitely, I learned under Glenn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Glenn, so it's really interesting to see his sons grow up. I've definitely known and met them for a long time and seen them through the years. But yeah, I got to learn under Glenn for many years, for probably a few years, and we did a lot of sculpture, and he definitely had changed my views when it came to art and fine arts and clay and what the whole world was. Because Glenn has an MFA or had an MFA, and he worked with some very pivotal and was a great artist with himself and hung in some dope places and walked the halls and the streets with the greats and was trained by some of the greats and stuff. So it was really an honor to be able to learn from him and spend time with him. I mean, we worked side by side delivering pots to rich people up on the hill, and then sweeping up the shop in Panama Pottery, the big old place, and he shares stories with just Soldners and all the kind of different crazy people that were in Davis. Dropping all the names, but it was fun. And Glenn was a party guy too, so it was fun to
really? Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, to kick back, and he was not a straight laced dude for sure. He had his time, and he knew what was up, and he wasn't shy about it for sure. And so it was cool. That was a really cool time. But through all that same time, again, coupling, sharing the thing, and always dipping in sculpture, and everybody was always pushing me to make functional work, and they're like, yo, you work in kitchens, why don't, you cook food, you serve food, why don't you make functional work? And even then, before then, still my time, my ideas of what art were just askewed, and they weren't trained, and I didn't have vocabulary for what I was trying to do. And so, I was like, no, I make sculptures. I don't really make functional work. That's not my drive. My drive is not to set up the wheel per se. And it began conversations of me trying to explain to people how cool clay was. It was no, you got to understand, clay is so multifaceted, dude. You don't have to be just a potter. You can do these other, or not just a potter, but a potter in itself, right?
Yes.
And even within those things, you're not understanding what potters do. They're doing millions of types of different things to even get to that vessel. They just chose that way to build it or whatever. And then, everybody's like, you're drunk. You're going off again. Sit down, Sue. You're preaching, talking about clay's going to save the world. But yeah, so that was my life for a long time and moved it through. But finally, Glenn was a really good inspiration in deciding to go through the higher education and start to take that journey. I mean, basically, he was like, you were doing it for enough years, you have all this cross training, you have connections with people. You know, I was older, so I think I was like 27 at that time.
When you went to California College of the Arts?
When I moved to the Bay and basically decided that's what I was gonna do, was I was gonna go to CCA. And Glenn wrote one of my letters of recommendation, and he went to school with Arthur Gonzalez. They both graduated from Davis together.
Oh my god, I didn't. That's so cool.
And so they got their MFAs together or something like that. And so Arthur Gonzalez was running the department at that time for ceramics. So it was like boom, boom, boom. I was coming in hot. Coming in hot for sure. And so I hung out in the Bay for like 3 years, worked some more. I was like, I want to party and show before I go to school, you know. And went to school, I think around like 29, 30.
Okay,
Yeah, it was great. Finished out my program. Like CCA was dope. I got to meet like some of the best people, like influentially. It's funny. I made a lot of friends with like the grad students.
Yeah.
And it probably was just the age demographic, but there was like 1 or 2 people that were in my same thing. Rose Ty, she makes great work. She's down in LA. But she was, had done ceramics and grown up in similar situations as far as finding it all throughout her life, and was starting college a little bit later, and was like, oh yeah, I've been trained, I've been doing this. And somebody told me the same thing. She had a mentor that told them the same thing. They're just like, you have all this training, you have all this background, you have connections. There's a one last sort of step or key if you want, but can be very helpful for you. And it's finishing off these higher education things. It will also help you start to think about things a little bit differently. And that was really like the key form. Like the people use their opportunities for whatever they want to use them for. And I went into the gate being like, yo, this is going to be networking. I'm going to connect all the things. Like, I'm going to like, I mean, I don't know college. Like I'm viewing like stuff that I see on TV. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get into some sort of clay fraternity. This is going to be sick. Like I'm going to have all these forever connections in there. And you can do that for sure. And it's really, really beautiful for that. But when I got to step back, and I felt like I was really lucky as being somebody that was older, that only because of the different kinds of experiences I had throughout, and being able to look at what was going on and what the school was setting up for. They have such a huge cross-disciplinary program that like that was really the coolest and biggest thing that happened, is that I got to start to look at art and the world and design and figure and just like all of this stuff in a completely different view. Like it snapped my view so many different ways, and it really gave me the vocabulary to be able to just explain what I wanted to do, and then help me gather more tools in my bag to be able to present that. Because that's in general for the arts what we're trying to do, right? We have a view of the world, and we're trying to, however we can, show everybody else what our canon is, right? Whether it's through aesthetics or sound or experience or any of those things. And so going to CCA and being able to intermix with everybody and walk the halls of like these people that I was like down for, right? That was also like the clay geek in me and stuff. Like we went to Viola Fry's studio.
Oh my
god!
Yeah, it was
sick.
My god!
It was so sick. Saw all of her like backwards work. Met her original assistant. It was cool. Yeah,
so
and that was like one of a million like dope ass things. Like
definitely
super cool. Made endangered bird nest species for this really cool program. The Oikonos like program off of the Año Nuevo, down by Half Moon Bay.
Right.
So it was beautiful. It was cool, and that's honestly where I got to fuse the two bodies of like really the bodies of work that I had been working on my entire life, that I didn't know that that's what I was working on, which is food and this sort of sculpture that I was doing.
Tell me about that. Like, what was how did that come together for you?
Well, so right before I decided to like go to college, like I knew I was in the Bay, I was living there for a few years, I was working at this like top-notch restaurant, doing my thing, and I remember I was talking to a cook friend of mine, and people were giving me more opportunities in this really high-end area for me to really make a food career. And I got to come in, and it was a really high, it was, it was 6 years ago? No. Oh, God.
What is time?
Yeah, because the 2-year gap, right? There was the 2-year gap. So, like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. But there was a really high time for cooks and Bay Area cooks and chefs coming up, and it was, and us being able to explain things and do things in a different way and be multifaceted and be a bartender and, have a really hardcore career, but you're also making things in the back of the house and people kind of see you as a chef, right? And having your own catering company, those are all like right there.
So it's like even your like food world is interdisciplinary.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And, I remember saying, I'm going to start school like next semester or the semester after, and a chef friend of mine, he's like, oh yeah, I didn't even think you were really going to do that. And I was like, oh man, I've had all these years of training. Like there's no way that I could, walk away from that. Like, yeah, but you have all this training in the food industry and you're going to walk away from that. And I was just like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
That's pretty hard, like for sure. And so it definitely like bit me in the butt and like really made me like sort of think about what was going on in my world. I obviously like was like, no, I got to finish off my stuff. I felt like the area that I was in the food industry, that it was of like a management and ownership level of things almost. And so I felt like that was something I could return to if
you stepped away.
Or if I felt like if I stepped away for a little bit and I felt like, the college experience wasn't working out for me, let's go back. I wasn't losing time per se or a bunch of opportunities. It seemed like the business was only going up, right?
Yeah.
And so I was okay with that in itself. When I had moved away and then I started to get a different view of what I felt like art was and what I was doing, different definitions of sculpture, different ideas of like ownership of like the type of artist that I was too.
Could you go into that a little bit more? Because you've mentioned that a couple times about how like it really, your view of art and what art was and what sculpture was really changed. Could you like detail that a little bit more? Like kind of what was your view? I mean, I guess you kind of talked a little bit about what your view was before, but what was the shift and what did it shift to?
Yeah, so in the beginning ideas of what sculpture was, it was in a direct physical definition of like additive and retractive things to a physical object. When I was chipping away or I was adding something to these things, whether it was, marble or clay or creating, a sculpture out of found object or any of these things, like it was a physical object. But when I got to think about it in a grander sense of being acts of service or acts of performance, then what I was doing was I was working in a category of artists that do what's called social sculpture. So I was creating either community or scenes or aspects of whatever I wanted to do, by either doing all of these things, lighting, sound, object, hitting the senses on all sort of forms, and then I was molding and manipulating this sort of scene of what was happening. It's like plays off of Dadaism and like sort of being weird and but like.
But I love the like again, we're talking about vocabulary, but I love the vocabulary of that because like I was trying to figure out like, okay, how do I introduce some of what Sue does, because I know that you have done, at least the only vocabulary I've had for it is like performance art, but it's so much like more than that. So I like the idea of social sculpture as a way of describing what you do. That's fascinating.
I appreciate that. There's a few artists that like keen themselves into that sort of idea in that area, and I thought that was cool vocabulary and that was cool words, and I started to akin it, and that's where I started to draw a lot of the things and the training that I've done in food service that really mimicked and coupled that. So when we started to get into professional practice stuff like in school, and it was basically, it was great. It's great that this school would teach, students and young kids like how to set this stuff up. And there was a very formative person that worked there. Her name was Edith Garcia, great artist, fire teacher, like just like great professor. Amazing, top of the line, like made it. You came out of her professional practice class and you had like your full portfolio done, your website, your logo, you had all your artist statements done, everything was all set up. Like it was intense, like for sure. She's very intense, but it's just, and it's things you don't even realize until you've gone through years of practice and go like, oh shit, I should have had that documentation, all these different things. And she just gets you set up in a rhythm and like almost like muscle memory of like, okay, now you do new stuff, now add it to your folder, now you do new stuff, now add it to here, now update your website, now move this around, you can change your logo. Are you about something different now? Like move it around.
The fact that there was even a professional like practices class is like, God, I wish I'd had that. Cause it's really amazing, and it was an inspiration for things that I am trying to do with some of the stuff at the studio, most definitely. But within that class, we were
they were going over also aspects of your professional practice when you're installing. And so basically they're trying to get people to care about what your environment looks like, or just understand that like you as the artist are setting the entire scene up for everything from all of the beginnings, from your professional practice, from your postcards, from how you light the studio. When the moment that they walk through the threshold of the gallery or whatever it is, boom, that's your art piece. And it's already started right there. And so when they said stuff like that, I was like, holy shit, you sound like my general manager at like a Michelin star restaurant. 100%.
Oh my God, yes.
All the way around. I was like, damn. And that was when we worked at Michelin star restaurants, the idea was that it was an experience we were creating.
Yeah.
From that super fine dining service, the hyper knowledge, the sort of like a fork doesn't hit the floor without 5 people getting it, without you even knowing. They call it soisé. It's like this weird French goofy term where everybody kind of like moves in a dance, and it's a real big dance sort of clockwork thing. And it's really beautiful, like as you're inside of it, and when you know, like sort of see how the sausage is made as or whatever, and you're a part of the system and stuff. It's a really pretty thing to like be a part of. It's it's performance art. And so all of that shit just sort of clicked together in like one moment where I was like, holy crap, like I've been trained for all of this stuff my entire career of what I've been doing. It's also one of my hugest passions, working in the food service and food industries and social justice when it comes to those things. And then I've had this like super loud voice, this aesthetic knowledge, this sort of drive to create and engineer and make things and want to do weird shit, and like how was I going to create all those too? And it just all sort of came together right there. It was like, cool, well, I feel empowered enough to call myself an artist, to start grabbing onto multiple terms and labels of what kind of art, mostly because I was knowledgeable about it. And so I think that's what like a bigger thing about it is that I was shocked to shit to understand that like when you go to art school or when you do a very heavy art program, I had really done and leaned into the thing of being like, yo, I'm gonna get to make as much shit as I want all day. That is a complete side thing. You write so much and you read so much. Yeah. It's so intense, the amount of reading and writing that you do. From what I've read and statistically, like an art major is like the 3rd most dropped out and like anxiety-ridden major underneath like lawyers and doctors.
Oh my God.
Mostly because anybody who has PhD programs or works with the bar, you have to do the same amount of like general education. Right. Plus you have lab, which is our studio time. Right. Which we're also trying to bid for professional practice. Like designers are trying to get their apprentice, or designers are trying to get their internships. The residents are trying to get into the residency programs, right? Yeah. The artists are trying to get into their residency programs. So you just have double on double on double on double work. Oh like God. You're never, that's why most of the studios in those places that you have access to are 24 hours.
Yeah, because you need that time.
You have to squeeze it in when you can. Yeah. So I got really lucky because I'm dyslexic. Oh. And so I learned to like train myself to learn auditory. So I like listened to all my books. So I got to double up on all my work.
Dude, oh my God.
I got really lucky.
That's great.
I got really lucky. Like, and again, a life's training of something that I like ended up paying off really hardcore in art school. So I would sit there and just in the studio listen to all of my homework and my readings that I needed to do, and then I could go to work and work 16 hours at the bar at the restaurant or whatever. But yeah, it really helped me to start. It was a great like moment. It was funny, like I said, to know and understand that like when you get into art school, you have to write and read so much, and so you're so knowledgeable. Like, and that's mainly what And for me, who has the type of personality that I have, where I really crave knowledge and I really am trying to do as much as I can to set that scene, then you really do get another big like resurgence in respect for the artists that came before you, because you're now understanding what they already understood in those moments. Like, oh, you were super weird and all of these other things happened for this reason because you knew that you already were creating the scene like in that stuff, So now you can dismantle that kind of thing, pick out the parts that were good, leave away all that other bullshit, and then make steps forward and leaps forward, and hopefully make new grounds, So it's been fun. It's been a cool journey to cook food for people and make plates and have them break them and.
Wow. Yeah. So when did you start? Well, I guess was it at CCA that you started doing the social sculpture where you, because I guess for folks who haven't seen your work, Like, how would you describe the work that you do now, like with food and with like the breaking? Because like I read about some of it because of course I always like researching before I go into an interview. But for our dear listeners, how would you describe like what those pieces are for you?
For sure, yeah. So yeah, no, I started to get into right at the end of my program. I was really just like super getting into exploring where my worlds connected when it came to the food service industry and it came to work or to ceramic artwork. I was really understanding the differences between certain words like clay and ceramics. And like I know that I really love clay. Like clay is really strong for me, and it's the things within clay that are very powerful and all the things that clay can do. Ceramics is all these other types of things. It's not that I don't like clay when it's fired or anything like that. It's just when people refer to me, I'll usually say I'm an artist that works with clay, as opposed to like a ceramicist or a potter or a maker or things like that.
Interesting.
But I was experimenting with all the ideas of food service. I was getting into, I've always been in general like pretty loud. I have a big energy when it comes to stuff, and I don't like to see, I like to stand up for certain sort of programs for sure. Like, I don't want to be the instigator of things, but if things are unjustful in the world, then I have no problem like talking about shitty things or bringing them up. My name in itself, Sioux Bean, is a specific like address of certain conversations. And so while I was in school and living in Oakland and just the stuff that I grew up as a Filipino Mexican, as a brown individual, and living in different kinds of communities, I've always been down. My family came from a Filipino and Mexican from the Lower Central Valley, and so they came into the state to work the fields, like during the Depression, that kind of stuff. And so I've always been a part of the proletariats, and so I've always been a part of the lower labor class and the working class, and I as being a food service worker, and starting from a dishwasher and working my way up to those things, it's not unnormal for any of that stuff. And my kinship is with people who work and who work labor specifically, and I could start to see getting more research into programs at school. I got to research more individuals that have been interested in where your clay comes from, where those types of things, what's the practice of clay, the ideas that clay is not clay is a finite product. It's not a sustainable product. Clay might be, ceramics isn't. And so that's again one of those like movements, right, of some of the things that I do like and don't like about clay versus ceramics, or not do or don't like, but why I make those those distinctions. But as I practiced like sort of through that stuff, and I was moving into different areas of exploring the food and the social justice programs, I wanted to see where those things aligned. So I wanted to see where labor practices aligned in the ceramics and the clay industry, and where they aligned in the food policies and food practices industry.
Okay.
Mostly because I felt a draw to both of those like really hardcore. I used a lot of clay. I saw a lot of clay being used in my life. I sold plates to restaurant workers or to industry workers and to restaurants. And there was always a big sort of conversation about handmade studio plates are so expensive. I could pay this much for these other plates, but then I would have to be like, but they're not being made maybe in the best practices or justifiable things. But at that same time, I had to turn back and look at ourselves and be like, well, am I being the most justifiable? And what's my carbon footprint on this clay? What am I understanding where this clay comes from? Am I understanding that it didn't get dug up in California, but that it got processed in California, and that all of those materials were mined from all over the world, right? Which maybe didn't have the best practices either, So am I being respectful for those types of things? And in that same way, I wanted to try to educate the restaurant people in the community that weren't educated about ceramics or clay, and understand that some of those prices were justified for sure within those things because of those practices, or because we were either being mindful. And then I wanted to educate the only other audience that I really had, which was the ceramics community, about food practices. And not that all of them weren't like, known about types of things, but it would amaze you about how many people are understanding about like what goes through like some celery that gets to their plate, or how many hands have to touch an apple before it gets to you, or what the sort of huge water usage and labor that's inside their almond milk, And so I don't want to be a bummer on people. I just want people to like really just, you know, have a grander respect for the usage of these things that really like could like dominate my life. You know, I love food and I love clay and I want to see them around as much as I can, and I want them shared with as many people as I can. But I also love just practices, and I think that the world needs to have a lot more of those just practices. And I understand that I'm loud for a reason, probably. I was probably, you know, born loud for a reason. Sometimes, you know, everybody has their different strengths when it comes to things, and mine might be more on the sort of, you know, loquacious side of the world. And
I think that's a good thing. I mean, honestly, I really do, because I think, especially because I feel like our generation, you know, I remember growing up with like, oh yeah, reduce, reuse, and recycle, but it's like we've seen that there is, I mean, there's so much more that goes into that. And I think what is important about being loud is that because there has been some progress made on like, or making people aware of how much environmentalism just in general is important. But it's kind of like, okay, there's been some progress with that, but there's all these other layers that it's like, okay, it's good that we've made some progress, but like, you know, again, how many people, you know, touch an apple before it gets to market, you know, like what's the water usage? There's all these other layers that go beyond just that initial like, oh, we need to be environmentally conscious, you know. So I think I'm glad you're loud.
Well, I appreciate that. For sure.
So you've done so many different things. And between, you know, because from what I remember looking up on your CV, you know, you've taught at a couple, you've been a studio manager at a couple like art institutions, you've done serveware for Crew, you've done you know, the social sculpture, you've done so many different things. So what led you to wanting to open up Sac Seed, the studio here in Sacramento?
Yeah, so I had consulted for a lot of places and helped run some larger studios in the Bay Area after I graduated. And I was sort of getting more involved in teaching. And I feel like it's kind of a natural progression after you graduate. You kind of pick up and start teaching a lot more. You know, either like you're in that role or that mode, or it's, you know, it's just you have access, you have accreditation with you now. Right? Probably is more the thing, right? So I got to a point where I got to see a lot of the sides of that side of the sort of area when it came to privately and even like nonprofit sides of studios, you know? So it was definitely a different eye. Even though I had grown up coming through many different kinds of studios, I was coming at it from the artist view of looking for a space to work. And so I would do what I needed to do to make it happen, help somebody as much as I could, but you're always a lot more turned inwards. And so, you know, less things about knowing like what the paper towels cost or like what your profit and losses are on clay or like any of that kind of shit, right? Like it's just like whatever. But you always get very emboldened in those times, even as like much as like you go through those series, like whatever, I could run a place like this. And I remember thinking that so many times, and then like after you finally open one, you're like, ah, damn, dude, I can just go kick my past self in the butt real quick. But after opening and seeing a bunch of different sites from really large corporations that came to market with 30-something wheels, multiple classes, huge programs. I got to getting good with some of them because of my food and beverage background, actually. A lot of the bread and butter with those places like would come from large events, from outside groups, you know, maybe it was like, because we were in the Bay at that time, Facebook or Adobe or all these things. They would have team building exercises or various things. They come in, they throw pots. It's like super fun. Any kind of a community studio-based thing, whether it's like rock climbing or, you know, anything that has a group sort of niche thing like that, a lot of the times they make a bulk of their money to keep those operations open through one-time or party events. It's pretty normal. Like, it's not the worst. Everybody just kind of sucks it up and it's like, okay, it's like, today's one of those days. But it can be its own sort of, you know, marketing platform, and it can be its own sort of thing. So I got to see that side of the world, something that came from, you know, that had people that were in charge of management and things that were from a financial background, and then would sort of work in tandem with a couple of more like expert qualities, ceramic people and that kind of thing. So, you know, some would come in as consulting. I came in through as consulting for some things. someone come in as like limited partnerships and help set up programs. I did some of that. Because of the food and beverage industry, I'd help set up the events programs, like for people, be like, oh yeah, this is how you do things. We can also broker them with, you know, like some catering, and we can set this stuff up. And so
were you still working in the food industry during, like, concurrently?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't really leave the food industry until probably like the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say maybe it was about a year before the pandemic. Like, I left it in the ways of, like, I used it. I could still be in it for fun. It was extra money or whatever. Not that there is extra money.
Yeah.
I mean, extra money, but I mean, it was money that was like, you know, I had more fun working.
A little more of a cushion. Yeah.
I wasn't less reliant on. And then after quarantine and everything, I fully just kind of was like, yo, I'm fine with not going back. It's been a long road on that side. And because I'm within my own practice of sort of merging the both things, and so it was time to just like be on my own thing. So when I got to do that, and then I got to help a grassroots place sort of start up and do their own thing and build that up, and I watched that sort of build up from like 4 wheels to like 13 wheels, and help them go out and open a side place outside of that and get that established and set up operations. And so I was getting a real feel for like sort of what I liked about things. I liked engineering, and it was a lot of things that I liked about clay, right? I liked to set up operations. I like to see the thing work. I love taking things apart and putting them back together, like fixing all that stuff. And my grandfather was a civil engineer, and so like, I have definitely stuff like in that bloodline or trains of thought when it may come to like that kind of thing. So I liked that for sure. I liked operations and moving that stuff. I like less of the other things like management or like, you know, marketing or like financials.
The operations part of it is so important though, because I think because that is often the most public facing side, like, you know, walking into a studio and kind of getting a sense of like, okay, does this work? Are things organized? Like, am I able to get the attention that I need as a customer? It's just, anyway, all of those things are the, you know, what is it? It's like a positive version of the third rail. It's like, does it work or does it not work? You know? So that's having that background, that's fantastic.
Well, and I think that, again, all of those things just started to inform each other. They were all trainings that I had for my own life, but now that I got to own them as not being compartmentalized parts of my life, it was in moments that I got to start to have ownership over my own, like, sort of identity as an artist. And so when it was hard, as I was going through, when I said, no, I'm a sculptor, not a ceramicist. Or when I said I'm a chef or a cook I'm a cook, not a chef. Or I'm a bartender, not a whatever. I don't know. It doesn't really, like, not a mixologist.
Right. That's the other term.
And so whatever points I was choosing on my things, and I had another artist have to tell me, be like, yo, you just make shit. Why don't you just be an artist and then just be accepting with all the things that you do as an artist? Because now you have free license to do whatever the you want. And because more people expect that from artists, not from a dude who's like, no, I work as a cook, as a bartender, and then I also do this thing, and then I also do this thing. It's like, you're just a maker, a guy who's an artist. So whether you're doing design or figuring out logos, setting up operations, like doing any of that stuff, it's all under that same umbrella. And so when I got to get to that part in my life where I felt comfortable with just saying that I was an artist and these are the many facets of the things that I do with my art, then all of this stuff started to feel a lot better. There was a lot more confidence in those things. And as I set up stuff like my website or set up operations or any of these things, I got to impart all of these little parts that, you know, were my art and started to make me feel good about like what I was creating, what I was doing. And then in a larger thing, when I got to step back from it, I was like, yo, this is a giant performance piece. Like, this is a giant social sculpture of what I'm doing. And what I'm using and doing is trying to get clay and use clay as a community agent, right? And so I'm trying to get people so into clay that they see how multifaceted and crazy it is, how intercultural it is, you know, how it spans all over the world and the things that it brings together, and its, you know, abilities to do all this cool stuff. And so that gets to be, you know, the vehicle for people to have bigger conversations, you know, and have conversations about other shit that's, you know, that's important and stuff and things. And so,
oh my God. If I wasn't already into clay, I'd be like, sign me up. Oh my God. You make it sound so good. I love that. I mean, you make it sound good because it is good.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what was the, like, when you say that it took you a while to feel comfortable with using the title as artist, what was the resistance there with that vocabulary change?
Yeah, I don't know. I think at some moment, I don't know what I was resisting. I'll have to talk to the therapist about that.
I hear you on that, my
For
dude.
sure, I'm sure that one came from a deeper level.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I think maybe it was because it was a choice. Because it was when I thought that if I said I was an artist, then that meant I couldn't be these other things. And so it was until I understood that being an artist was actually letting me be all of these things.
Yeah.
I think it was just that shift. I think my still thoughts of art were stuck under another compartmentalized thing that didn't allow me to be other stuff or do other things. And then I think there was just a small sense of just like, I felt a little cheese, like, I'm an artist. Like, or like maybe I didn't feel like I don't know. It just didn't feel quite earned yet or something. Or like I don't know. It didn't feel quite earned probably in like a imposter syndrome style.
Yeah, because I think it's pretty clear that you had put in literally your entire life, you're saying, there's all these different elements of who you are coming together in this giant social sculpture. I love that.
It's been nice. It's been nice to be able to have a lot of just reassurance when it comes to those moments and stuff. And the past couple years have been good for that. I mean, we'll say 4 years have been good for that. Past four years have been good for that. Obviously, things have had to take a little bit of a hiatus through all the craziness and stuff. But, I've been lucky that the things that I've been trying to champion as far as, social justice with marginalized communities within the arts community, and then just sort of food policy and social justice through labor and comes in that practice, are things that are on more of the highlight in the coming moments, like within the last year or two, And so as far as been lucky that I've been able to, that it's been voiced a lot more. So I'm glad that those things have been come up, and I am writing right behind that. So I'm able to use whatever platform that I have to be able to champion that, and it coming through with a real strong voice to know that I've been championing it for a little while. So that part feels nice that more people are being aware of that kind of stuff, and it's really interesting because of the pandemic. A lot more artists of color, and specifically ceramic artists of color, have been able to find each other because people have been, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is a thing that a lot of ceramic artists of colors have been talking about for a minute, because a lot of things have gone online and a lot of people had switched into, promoting themselves more online. Those things we've all been able to see a lot more. And so there is an interesting juxtaposition where there's one part of the conversation where people are saying, oh, look at all these dope artists of color coming out and stuff. But then there's all these artists of color going, we've been here. Like, we've been out here for a long time. Like, I'm stoked that everybody, some or more types of people are starting to see all of us, but the lineage of artists of color is, they've been in there.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, where I saw that happening. I saw how interested I was in operations. I had moved back to Sacramento for some work. I was on hold for a residency program that I was going to do, and then I was making work for a show at Root Division that was happening at that time, and I was looking for a studio.
Okay.
And so as I was looking for a studio and I was back in Sac, I was honestly like just a little bummed in the fact that like I didn't see that a lot of stuff had changed since I had left, like in the 10 years prior, when it came to accessing spaces like that. And not only just because of like sort of COVID restrictions and things, but just in general, like it was still pretty restrictive. And it was still, a coveted and a very kind of like who kind of spot. And that was a bummer. It was a bummer to see. It was a bummer to see after coming from a bubble like the Bay. And that had all of these specific champion programs for types of things. And and there's a huge ceramics community in Oakland and in San Francisco. And they've been going on for a long time. So they have a deep lineage, and not that Sacramento doesn't. Sacramento has a very deep lineage in itself. But I'd like to see things like Ruby's. I don't know if you're familiar with Ruby's. It's a very old nonprofit studio in San Francisco that's been around for a very long time. I want to say at least 60 years, maybe a little bit longer. And they're like in the Castro or something like that. They champion awesome studio. But or the Berkeley Potter studio, seeing something that is like as famous and infamous like the Berkeley Potter studio. I'd love to see that here, something that is established for the community and help using those things. And I know when I came back, like ACAI is doing really good stuff when it comes to those things. Alpha's always been championing stuff for a long time and having their spots.
Verge is doing more, which is one of the reasons that we interviewed them for the podcast. But yeah, it was interesting. Like other than Alpha and Verge, I couldn't really think of. I mean, and then finding out about your studio. We really don't, all things considered, have that much that is available, and also again available at a certain price, because there's certain the financial restrictions are real, and if there's not like a relatively low bar to entry to start getting involved, then you're always gonna tend to get like a certain kind of clientele, just because it's like, okay, if you have the money to do this, then
the access points for the medium are funneled. And so the thing is when I came in, I know from having all my years of knowledge, and even when I first started, when I was into it as a 14-year-old kid who lived in the hood, I worked with a fucking block of clay on my desk, cut it with a speaker wire, and used a pocket knife, and ran that stuff to school and fired it there. And so you can build in whatever situation that you need to build, but it's about creating a good space that is welcoming to be able to have creative area, right? And when you have to pile on millions of things like, I can't drive there, or I have to drive there, I can't take the bus. It's just quite out of price range. There, is strange community. There's things that make me feel uncomfortable, whatever the thing may be, Then all of a sudden you squeeze all the way into that, and now you're left with a very minuscule amount of, feeling good about that creative space. And so I wanted to make somewhere that I could open up that funneling as much as I can, and have a space that looked a little bit more like the stuff that I represented and the stuff that I felt comfortable in. I didn't think I was the only one that wanted to do that, or have a space that was like that felt maybe a little bit uncomfortable in some of the more restrictive sort of communities when it came to those things. So when I looked around, I couldn't see. I was like, dude, I live downtown. I don't drive, for specific reasons, I mean, I don't like cars that much, I try to be a low carbon footprint as much as I can.
For real.
But, I like traveling within the city and public transportation. I come from humble means of people that, ride bikes and take trains in and stuff. And so as a college student or as a high school student, that's the only way I was going to travel with any of those things. And so I just said there needs to be a space that is able to have access, and then access as much points as we possibly can. And so having a space downtown, having a space with 4 walls and a roof that has AC, and heat.
Yes.
Right? Having a clean bathroom, things like that, that are minimal asks, you'd think, but people outside the ceramics community probably don't understand. But within it,
within it, we're like, it's got AC and heating. What?
Yeah, right. And I understand that. I understand all of that stuff. You know? And having a place where you see people that look like you making, and in a bigger realm, having a comfortable place to have conversation. And that's the bigger thing, is that because a lot of conversation needs to be had in these moments, like right now, there's a lot to talk about. And not talking about this stuff is not necessarily the side of things that I rely on, And my idea, or my journey for Seed and for its sort of piece, or what's going on with that, is a place where there is community activism, where there's community action. It's not a place specifically where somebody wants to go and get away from their things. It can be. There's always headphones. There's always area for you to create your stuff. But as an open studio of dialogue, I know that good art or nice art or well-intentioned, conceptualized art comes from bigger conversations and stuff, and I want people to come. Some of the first conversations that were had with some of the first people that worked in work trade for us they were asking me about the censorship policies within my studios, and I was like, excuse me, we don't have well, let's wait, let's talk about this and see what's up. And, there was an area where somebody was protesting a colonizer, and it was offending people amongst the studio, and they're asked to not do that anymore. And so it was we can't have that. That's not a thing. And so we're gonna make room for all of that stuff. And that's specifically the types of things that I want to champion. 100%. I want to champion open voice. I want to champion hard conversations like that, you know, and I want to make sure that those are being talked to. You know, if I have to tell Deb, I love Deb, she's a great person, but if I have to tell her we listen to Kendrick Lamar and here, like, we listen to Kendrick Lamar, like, another song will come on, but, you know, to some people in some communities, that is cathartic for us. Like, that is the stuff that we want. And we've been told to turn down our music and change that many times, you know. We can work things out. It's a welcoming space for everybody. But that's the thing, is it starts with the people, with the marginalized communities first. And then it moves outwards in the other ways. And so, you know, my bigger idea with doing that was trying to create a space that was creating enough welcoming area and enough open area for people to not feel stifled.
So in terms of the structure of how the studio works, do people come in and rent like a specific like space? Is it like an open studio type of thing where people can come in, hop on any wheel, and then, you know, dip? Or like how does that like, how is the structure of
For sure.
How does that work?
Sure. So
like, for folks who might be interested in like checking it out.
And in like a larger area, I've always wanted to I wanted to share as much clay knowledge as I can with people. And so from the start, it was about clay, culture, community, and if I can sprinkle some culinary love in there, then that's like that's all the spots that Seed's like about. So within the sort of lessons as we teach and we learn things, at the beginning I was kind of didactic about it, but I've definitely backed off like as it's on going through and understood that just like when knowledge kind of gets passed down, especially cultural knowledge and things that I want people to absorb in a grander scheme, you know, I can teach you about a marbling effect, but I'd love to show you or tell you about where it comes from as far as an agate ware or things that, like, you know, it may have indigenous roots of from other cultures, you know, and types of those areas, or what one form is really reminiscing or replicating from another form, or where cobalt comes from, or, you know, the different parts of porcelain and its lineage of things, you know. And so, but when people are first learning how to like center, it's kind of a lot.
I hear that.
It's a lot to take in. So now I just we try to do it in really soft forms. And so as we're going through, you know, we just implement it in. I try to do it like once a day. When I see that question come up, I'm like, hey, here's your cultural knowledge for the day. Guys, your cultural clay knowledge for the day. But there's three or four ways to take classes. So we have one times where people can just sort of drop in and take single sessions, and that's geared towards like the sort of like if you want to try it out, if you're curious, or people who want to do like birthday parties or rent out events or that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
Sure. It's a really nice space, and it's in Midtown, and because I do come from food and beverage, I do recognize like all of that stuff. And so anybody who wants to rent out the space in itself and stuff, we definitely have things. And because I do food and beverage, you know, there's always beautiful catering options within any of that stuff. Which is a part where now when I cook for people and I do events like that, or I work for that stuff, it's great because I get to talk about how it's just another part of my art that I make. So now I get to make art pieces for people within these types of like realms and these things, and I don't feel so beholden or whatever to a nomenclature of a catering package or, you know, or everything. It's like, no, this is my art piece for your event, and that's what we got.
Oh, I love that.
It is, you know? And so I can take from some of the commercial aspects out of the situation, you know, and let it be an experience again for them. Which is nice. So you can rent parties. It's single session prices and all that stuff, all the various prices. And then we do 4-week classes. So I really wanted to set up a program, and it was a program that I took from something that I had developed while I was living in the Bay Area and helping a grassroots studio start up in there, in the Mission Artillery is the name of them. And then we had sort of worked out various areas, but basically we do one class each week, starting with throwing and centering, and then the second week is trimming and hand building, and then the third week is sort of, you know, it's their free day to implement all those things, and then fourth week is glaze. And throughout that entire 30 days, they have access to the studio the entire time.
Wow.
So they can come in and practice whatever they want to do.
That's a good deal, dude. Like,
good deal,
wow.
for sure,
Oh my God.
And like I said, I want people to access the studio, you know? The place is not, it's, you know, like, it's a thing. It's its thing. It's a vibe. It's a vibe in there, you know? It's a fucking vibe. But it's there to have conversation. It's there to create. It's there to talk about all the cool stuff about clay and culture and, you know. So I want people to come in and practice. And I think that's one of the bigger parts of the curriculum in itself. which can be hard for some people in the ways that they like to learn. But I teach in like you gotta mess up to learn.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of ceramics people who are in it for a while do understand those parts of the things.
Yeah.
When we're marketing things like education or learning aspects and stuff, it can get kind of a bumpy road because, you know, it's hard to tell somebody you're going to be your own teacher, kind of, but I'll be there to guide you and spot you, like, as things go.
Yeah.
But, you know, the people who like it stay, the people who don't, you know, find it for what it is and then either go. But, you know, I want to make sure that everybody gets set up with foundations and has the open-ended areas to fail as much as they can. Because, you know, we learn so much from ceramics by failing.
So true.
It's the best, like, in that way, right? It's the only way you can be, it's one of the only things that I ever could feel so gratified from, like, failing. It's like, well, at least I know not to do that again.
Yeah.
In a real way.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, we have that. And then we have membership and residency. Mostly the membership is like sort of intertwined with an intermediate sort of like Will 2 classes.
Okay.
So we kind of move them from the initial 4-week classes where everybody shares like a big safe. So there's about 12 spots for the Wheel 1. Okay. And then 8 spots for the intermediate. And we do the intermediate or level 2 like they meet twice a week, so they have a longer sort of outcome, and that's where we sort of blend the things that they've been working on. You know, we'll do like ongis, like kimchi jars, right? And so we'll blend like coiling technique with throwing and building up, and then taking it off the wheel, or like 2 pieces and bringing them together, or you know, various ways to gain
like
height.
Intermediate techniques. Yeah.
Because you have to build them to get to that point, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes to people who are more experienced at that point, people are either looking at your studio to be like, are you going to be around for a minute? Or are you going to like, you know, what types of workshops or longer ended workshops may not do? Yeah. Or they're within their own sort of practice. And so they're just like not, you know, like seeing you. So usually like a lot of the level 2s, and when you have advancement within the studio, I've noticed that it comes from like being built within the studio, which is everything that like I definitely wanted, because everybody is within that sort of tone and that culture of like how we're all doing, because we run a dry studio there as much as we can, so we recycle almost like 90% of all the clay waste out of everything. That's awesome. Which is not weird to like say to other ceramics people.
Yeah, no, I mean, we get it. I mean, you see that biggest pile of clay.
We all have our slot buckets and stuff. But I think what's good, and one of the ideas with Seed is to make sure that I pass that knowledge very hardcore to the students, and so that when the first thing that they understand when they come in is that the clay has been labored for, it's laborious, it's a finite product, it deserves respect, and then this is how we reconstitute it and we do these things, and this is what happens throughout the process. So it's nice. Everybody gets to be on the same terms. We also taper their water, so we don't, they get their water all from a single source as opposed from the sink or whatever, and then I monitor how much that source gets filled. So I get to know each week like how much water we use each week.
That's great.
It's pretty dope. We only use about 8 quarts a day, actually.
Wow.
For a studio of like almost 40 something. Yeah, with like 24 members and 24 students.
Dude, that's great.
Yeah, it's like 8 to 12 quarts a day we use. It's pretty cool.
Wow, yeah, that is like,
it's pretty insane. So it all starts with the beginnings of the knowledge, like for them, you know. So I try to train them when they're at the beginning to throw dry.
Throw dry. Yes.
To throw dry, or within the like areas that they can, you know.
Yeah.
Whenever we teach, we try to teach like in a more of a philosophy and less of a mimic.
Yeah.
Which has its ways. It's not always everybody's learning tea. And if we need to get there, then I'll demo and we'll do things, or I'll go over hand positions and stuff. Yeah. But I really try to get everybody to understand the physics of it and get that kind of aha moment when they find where the clay starts sinking for them and rising for them. Yes. So I teach them cone up and cone down like immediately the first day, and I drill it into them like really hardcore. Yeah. Production pottery style. Cut it off, do it again. Cut it off, do it again. Cut it off, do it again. Yes. So by the time they get to their end of their like 2 hours at the beginning, they're like, oh my God, I pulled this you know? I centered this thing, which is great because confidence is boosted, right? And then they're in there and they're doing stuff and they're making. But yeah, when you don't create open-ended. Well, I don't know. I think it's just the information. When I give them the information and I let them know what's happening, this is what we're doing. Use as much water as you want, but this is where it is at the end, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's just, it sounds like it's just really bringing that to the forefront of the knowledge. Because, I mean, it is like, it is like ceramics or clay, I guess, is compared to some other materials, it's not as bad as some other things, but it's also like, yeah, no, the water aspect of it, especially in California, is so important. And it's not like, oh God, it drives me crazy at the community college where I used to volunteer in the before times. Just seeing folks just get rid of water so much, I'm just like, oh my God, it drives me crazy. So I think it's good that you're focusing on that.
And it might be a specific California, like to us. Like, from California for sure. It's like, because I tell some of the other like East Coast artists that I know and stuff, they're like, what?
Yeah,
like,
what's the big deal?
Why would I care how much water I use each day? I'm like, okay, guy, we'll get there.
It'll
go over there sometime. But yeah, for at least other Californians, we can all know and be proud that I'm
yes, definitely.
I'm using very minimal and working on a filtering processor program where I can reuse the top water that we pull off from the other stuff too. We try to water the plants as much as we can and do what we can with it. But
that's good. Yeah. That's good. So what is Seed doing for IMCECA, and what are you doing for IMCECA?
Oh yeah, craziness. So I got really lucky to be one of the speakers.
Congratulations, that's awesome, dude.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's really cool in the ways too that and generally I'm mostly just speaking about my work and like what I've done as opposed to like a specific topic. But I guess my work has really been geared towards a specific topic. So it is surreal in those two ways, I guess, because I'm talking about my work and what I'm doing, but in a grander sense I'm trying to talk about food access, how to use clay and food as community agents and bait to sort of get in a grander audience to talk about harder issues when it comes to, access, labor rights, justice systems, these sort of grander things. In a specific, Seed it's one of my cooler sculptures, I guess I could say, and it's definitely an art piece that I'm presenting to IMCECA in its entirety from all the things that we were talking about as it being a place for community engagement, for the hard topics and, and the good topics, for it to be a center for food knowledge and community and access. We try to keep fresh fruits and things there and all kinds of stuff. And it's for the, for everybody. I don't want any of the students who can barely afford to have a studio space to not be hungry. So we try to make sure that all of those things are there because those are things that, we all really champion. But, its way in implementing culture to the dry studio aspect of it, just all the way around in a fuller thing. I myself would like to see, or I see it as just sort of being almost like a proof of concept into a sort of grander sort of program that may or may not be realized later. But at least right now it's got a very cool stage and pedestal on itself. We'll be talking about Seed. And see, what is it, 2 weeks from now almost? Or
2 weeks? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So super excited, super crazy. It's in Sac, right?
I know. Oh my gosh. I find it so funny because, so Donte and I were going to go to the IMCECA, what was it? That was going to be in Richmond. Mm-hmm. And then the pandemic hit. Yeah. So we didn't go. So it's so funny because I feel like, on the one hand, I want to go to IMCECA almost like a con goer, wide eyes, this is my first time, I've never done this before. But it's also but I'm a part of the host city, so I need to be involved in these other things. So I'm doing a couple clay camps through Verge. Oh, cool. And I have a piece in a show I guess it's going to be in the convention center itself. Mm-hmm. But it's funny because it's you've done IMCECA before. I don't know, what advice would you give to someone who's, it's their first time, maybe, because I'm going to be buying a ticket, but also the tickets are really expensive. Yeah. So it's for someone who is getting the ticket, what would you recommend? And for someone who isn't able to afford a ticket, but still wants to be involved in, maybe checking out gallery shows or something, what would you recommend for the new IMCECA goer?
Yeah, definitely. Well, if anybody's first going to the IMCECA, I definitely say look into the volunteer program. That's definitely helped me out in many situations of going to many different IMCECAs. Okay. The volunteer program is really cool. You put in a few hours, you get free access for the rest of the day. It's super chill. I'm pretty sure they still have some signups open. They usually fill up really fast, so definitely look into that as soon as you can when it comes to that. Outside of that, yes, one of the most pivotal things is to see all the artwork in the outside and sort of diaspora of that.
Yeah.
And if you can travel because everybody's having shows right now from San Francisco all the way to Sacramento to Napa and everywhere. I think that was sort of something that I know that NCECA had. It was kind of a crazy, like, wide-eyed view for NCECA to grasp. Most of the cities that NCECA comes into, their community is in a sort of a tight-knit circle, whereas Northern California or Sacramento's NCECA is spanning a huge, huge area, right?
Yeah.
There's professional artists and great ceramics communities that are going, like I said, from Napa to the Bay to here. And they're all pumped and ready and putting up their new shows and stuff. So anybody who's not, check it out. You can always look at the NCECA website and check out to see what galleries are showing and like within those sort of like stops. There's also like renegade people that are just doing stuff because they know that like everybody's gonna come.
Yeah.
So check out lots of that stuff. If you do get a ticket or go to any of the things, demos are always super fun, for sure.
Okay.
The opening lecture is like the one to go to. Like, NCECA does a great job of picking like very inspiring people on the opening days. And you get to really see some legendary people sometimes too. Like there's a really, really legendary social activist that's speaking for this first one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then I got to see like Jerry Saltz like one time. He's like a really hardcore art critic. Yeah, there's just like, so go to the first show, see that. Definitely go to Sioux Bean's talk on Thursday at 5.
Yes, Thursday at 5.
No, but, and then try to see the emerging artists. The emerging artist is the one to go to for sure. And then the party. Yeah.
Oh, because tell me about the party.
Yeah,
tell me about the party.
No, definitely go about the party. I mean, if you get a ticket and I forget if you're a full pass holder or you get a ticket for that day, but there's a party. I think it's on Friday. Yeah. And that's like always like legendary, like the party. It's usually a dance party, and I heard this year they're gonna do something like a little bit different.
Oh, right, because of COVID.
Just to not like encourage as much heavy breathing.
Yeah. Yes, that makes sense.
So I think it's more. It's going to be a little bit more of like a show.
Okay.
So, but from what I hear, it's pretty cool.
Oh.
So yeah, party, emerging artists, demos, and then really just like take it all in because it's like it's way more than you can even process in a generality. Take plenty of photos because you're definitely not going to remember everything you saw.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Look out for there's some good colleges out there too. Like I'd say that's another great part. If you're somebody that's coming in who's a budding artist or looking within the thing, check out your prospective places that like you may or may not like feel like you have an idea of going to. A lot of times you can trace artists that maybe you like or you have inspiration from and just go check their website, see if you can see where they got their MFA or where they got educated at. And check out their ceramics program or check out ceramics programs that maybe you've heard of. You know, Alfred, Kansas City's really good. Arkansas is cool. Washington's dope. Long Beach. All these places have really, really like pivotal CCA. They all got really dope ass programs. And, you know, what's cool is you get to see a sense of like what those programs have a little bit more of an emphasis on. You know, some programs have a little bit more of an emphasis on material knowledge. Maybe more craftsmen and industrialization when it comes to that, you know. Some practices have more of an education knowledge.
Okay,
or emphasis. Some are have a fine arts emphasis and they're really stretching the bounds and you're like, what is this? What is this piece of wood in the middle of a corner of a room doing this ceramics thing? But that's what's so cool about clay. Is that you can do that. You can totally do that.
Yes.
So just check out those programs. Yeah, and have all the fun, dude. Talk to all the people. I say like that's one of the like outside of all the bullshit that I just said. Like talk to the people. Like talk to everybody because this is like one of the few times that when you bore your friends with all like the excitement and giddiness that you get over a crazing glaze or a new mud tool or like any of this shit. You finally get to be with people, like multiple people that are surrounded and just as excited to hear about all of those things. All of your fires, all of your stuff. Yeah, it's a big old clay dork fest. I love it. Yeah, it's the best.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
It's very cool. It's very cool. Go to all the places. Yeah, go to all the places of all the things. And enjoy the Sac food and beverage community, to be quite honest with you. Yeah. If you're not familiar with the downtown area, those things, like there's top-notch food, Sioux Bean recommends all the way around.
Yes,
yeah.
and go to Crew because
Yeah,
they will see your server. You know, it's funny actually. So my boyfriend and I have gone to Crew the last couple of years for our anniversary, and I'm always like looking at the ceramics and being like, this is so cool. Who does this? And they weren't able. They gave me the information of where they get some of their cups from, but the plates that you made, I'm like, these are really unique. So when I was researching you, and I'm like, oh my god, these are the plates. Like, this is it. I literally talked to my boyfriend, like, Cody, look at this. This is look at the guy I'm interviewing tomorrow. I did these plates from Crew, and he's like, whoa.
That's sweet.
So so go to Crew, check out Sacramento's. God, we've got so much great food.
Yeah. Great food. That's some of the people. I mean, things like that. So I have plates in a few of the other places for sure. But that was where I got to build that conversation and like build that stuff. Is I got to have, because I came up through the ranks and worked with those chefs since we were all from the beginning, as a server or a bartender, you know, or like sweeping or mopping or doing dishes for all these people. All these people who now have, you know, I mean, now we're all old, so I guess that happens when you get old, but you know, they have award-winning restaurants, and we get to make work for them and have bigger conversations about this stuff, and I get to start to educate them about, like we were saying before, you know, some of those prices are justified. You know, and then when you have you know, dope people like that representing you, then other chefs start to recognize and see, you know, and so it just sort of like plants that seed, if you will.
It comes full circle. Oh my gosh. Well, Sioux Bean, thank you so much for coming to the Mud Peddlers. I will include all of Sioux's information in below, and thank you so much for having this conversation.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Okay, bye.